Women are underrepresented on corporate boards, and the competition is fierce for the relatively small number of roles compared to potential candidates. With so few board seats opening every year, and with a strong preference toward for-profit CEOs to fill the open roles, it is a real challenge to get through the boardroom door. But if it's an ambition of yours, our esteemed guests will help you crack the code. The panelists for this session are the Honorable Clara Dominguez, is the principal of Dominguez and Associates. Dawn Sweeney is the board member for Site Centers and executive in residence at Georgetown University. Ellen Zane is the retired president and chief executive officer of Tufts Medical Center and the Floating Hospital. And our moderator for today is Jan Molino, the president and chief executive officer and board and career coach for Aspire Ascend. Jan, I'll go ahead and hand this off to you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to How to Get Your First For-Profit Board Seat. We have an excellent panel today, and I know that the discussion is going to be truly powerful. You know, before we get started, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit about women in the board. I've been working and coaching to diversify boards of directors for more than 16 years, and gender parity is still moving at a glacial pace. Women hold 20% of the board seats, and that happened last year in the Russell 3000 when we got 20.04%. So it's an interesting concept. Now in California, things started to change, and beginning January the 1st, every public company in the state must have at least one female director. And there are actual penalties for missing that goal, which are pretty stiff. Companies that don't add at least one female board member and notify the state in time could risk fines of $100,000 for the first violation and $300,000 for repeat violations. So hopefully those first women board directors will mentor others and still have other women to follow. So something that I tell people all the time when I'm coaching them is that having women in the boardroom is just plain smart business. And the goal can't be just to have one woman in the boardroom. One woman is a token. 2 is competition. And 3 makes up a quorum. 3 is really the magic number that we're looking for as we move forward with women in the boardroom. You know, many years ago, when Kathy Biggins joined the Best Buy board in 1999, she was the only woman in the room, not just alone in the boardroom. And today, she's one of 7 women of the 11-member board of Best Buy. That's some pretty good statistics. So, you know, the interesting thing about what women bring to the boardroom is that, according to McKinsey, 66% higher return on investment when companies with women on their boards. And for all of you CEOs sitting out there in the audience, here's another statistic that'll bring it closer to home. Boardrooms that have women in their, companies that have women on their boardroom pay their CEOs 15% more. So that ought to be a nice incentive for the boardroom. So today we're going to talk about taking charge of your destiny and learning from these women board directors of how they got on the corporate board seats and lessons along the way. So we're going to start and ask each one of you, and I'll start with Carrie. Just tell us briefly how you got your first corporate board seat and how long did it take you to get there? And part 2 would be, what do you think got in your way, or how do you think doors open for you? Carrie?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Jan. Thank you so very much for, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Well, thank you. Let me just take a moment to say how delighted I am to join this terrific panel. And I want to congratulate Modern Healthcare on their 10th anniversary of women leaders in healthcare. It's not on my bio, but I worked my way through college working at a hospital on the weekend and 11 to 7 a.m. shift. So I have tremendous admiration for individuals who've dedicated their lives to the caring of others. So thank you for that. And so my first board actually came on the heels of completing my my 5-year term as chair of EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And it actually came through a search firm But I have to tell you, I don't credit the search firm as much as I credit the search consultant for successfully on that first board. They only had a woman on that particular board back then. And so the criteria, the qualifications they were looking for had to do with they wanted somebody with a public policy background because the woman I was replacing was a retired ambassador. So they wanted somebody with a public policy background, someone who also had human capital experience. It's a staffing company that I still serve on. And someone that was recognized, somebody that was recognized. Companies love to brag about the people they place on board. So the more visibility and exposure you have, the prouder they feel about your placement. And I was fortunate. I had been on as chair of the EOC. I traveled all over the nation, giving speeches, speaking. Writing articles, speaking public radio and television, and so on. So I had that visibility and I checked the boxes. But I have to tell you that two things, as I look back on that particular first experience, the two things that got me to join that board, number one, was the strong advocacy from that particular search consultant. I had worked with her. If you looked at my bio, my background, I did executive search work. So I knew this person and she knew me very well. And so she had a very strong advocacy on my behalf. And the second thing, it was the networking, because boards don't just rely on the references that a search consultant might provide them. They do their own. And so I was very fortunate to have developed a broad network of supporters or sponsors who reaffirmed the importance of my serving on a board. So it was a very unique experience. I'm on two other boards and they both came through different tracks, not through a search firm. But this one in particular was through that. And I think some of the challenges for getting on your first board is oftentimes, and I know I felt that, there is a hesitancy on the part of the board members to to determine whether or not is this person going to be acceptable to us. Is she going to be comfortable in our club? The kinds of comfort, social connections that those individuals who navigate at those circles are used to. And so for somebody who's a woman who is Hispanic, really brings a completely different perspective, and that was a bit of an obstacle to overcome at first, and to gain their trust and confidence.
Thanks, Carrie. That was great. Dawn?
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, just a pleasure to be here with all of you and three women on this panel whom I greatly admire and have for many years. My story is almost identical and completely different from Carrie's. And so you'll see themes, I think, as we each tell our stories, and you'll see the things that are similar and you'll see the things that might be slightly different. But there is almost a pattern, it seems, to successful board work and successful board search. And the things that occurred in my life that were similar to Carrie's that led me to my first public company board were really being in a visible role. I was the CEO of the National Restaurant Association. I served in that role for 12 years. I just retired at the end of 2019. But about 4 years ago, I would say, when I was still in that role, I thought that I would like to take on a public company board opportunity. And I started just doing some research and talking to friends and people I respected and trusted about my desires. And that's, I think, the first step for any of us, is just to be kind of clear on the direction you want to go, the kind of board you'd like to be on, where you think you could add the greatest value, and begin to talk with your network and people that you, again, trust and admire for advice and counsel. And I did that. And one of the things that came from that was that I was invited to participate in a program that is run at the Harvard Business School, underwritten by a woman named Linda Rabbit, who is well known to many of us on this panel, and perhaps several of you, a real leader in the field of women in boards, as well as her own personal career. she underwrote a program at the Harvard Business School called Women on Boards. And I was in the inaugural class for that program. And it was a week-long program to begin to help women who are interested in serving on public company boards really understand what that service entails, and to ensure that as you pursue that track, you really have a good understanding of what the opportunities are, and also kind of what the responsibilities are. And I did that course, and in the course of doing that course, I met several women, obviously, over the course of the week, one of whom 2 years later was already on a public company board, and the board she was serving on had a 5-person board. They were looking to expand to 7 people. And so they were looking for 2 board members to join them. And they asked each of the 5 sitting board members who they would recommend, and everyone came forward with some names. And my friend, who was on the board at the time, gave them 2 names of people she thought would be particularly good, and it happened to be 2 of us whom she had met at this Harvard program. And the board then decided to go out and do a nationwide search, and they identified 175 people, and they narrowed it down 3 or 4 different times to 30 people. And then they interviewed 17 people. And at the end of that entire process, they named 2 directors. And it was myself and this other woman that the woman had originally recommended, 18 months before. And so I would say that the similarities here and the opportunities really are about, you never know when you might be in the company of someone who can assist you. And oftentimes it's not the person you think. If you were asked to make a list of the 10 people that you're sure will be your connection to your board seat, I would be real surprised if any one of them actually in the end will be. It'll be some person who's not even necessarily on your radar screen, oftentimes who will be that point of connection. So the opportunity is to, as Carrie was saying, ensure that you are serving at your best at all times, wherever you are, because you never know where you might be interfacing with somebody who would be in a position at some point to recommend you to serve on a board of this type. I had served on a couple of very large nonprofit boards. I'd been on the board of Save the Children, and still am, for almost 15 years. In the course of that, I had the opportunity to meet and work side by side with very well-known and well-respected people who had run major Fortune 50 corporations. When it came time to give my list of references for this public company board seat, I was able to give Ann Mulcahy, the former chairman of Xerox, and Dr. Jill Biden, the current was the second lady, maybe will be the first lady coming forward, and people of that stature, which again only happened because I had been in those environments and served in places where you were kind of meeting people of that caliber. So having said all that, I think it really is about supporting your network, doing what you can to help others doing what they can to help you, and then being open to the surprise, as it was in my case, that I had a vision of where I was headed and who was going to help me, and those people were very helpful. But in the end, it was somebody very unexpected who was the key for me having the opportunity to get my first public company board seat.
Thank you, Dawn. Ellen?
Good afternoon, and again, my thanks to my colleagues on this panel and to Modern Healthcare. In my case, my first public company board was complete serendipity. I was giving a speech to the trustees at Tufts University while I was the CEO at Tufts Medical Center and the Floating Hospital for Children in Boston. At the end of my speech, out of the blue, one of the trustees walked up to me and said, "Ellen, I know you have a day job, but I'm sitting on the board of lead director," was what he said to me, "of a very large clinical research organization, a CRO, that many in our audience will know. They do major clinical trials for the pharmaceutical industry." I was interested, and I did some background and ended up on the board of Parexel International, which was one of the country's largest clinical research organizations. I think, as my colleagues have said, a lot of this does end up being serendipity. I think Dawn put it very well. You never know who you're sitting next to. You never know who you're talking to. And the fact is, we can all plan, but your network is important in my view. And I have many stories about how I've ended up on various public company boards, and it's oftentimes because somebody who knows somebody understands what a company is going to need and thinks you're a good fit. I've been on a number of public company boards today. I sit on 4 corporate boards, including very large companies like Boston Scientific, who many in our audience will be familiar with. So I would say, yes, it's important to get to know the recruiters, particularly if you're in healthcare and are interested in the many giant facets in the healthcare industry. But it's also important to think about your network and work together with others, because once they get to know you and know what your skill set is, then it's so much easier to know what might be a really good match. As Dawn said, we all want to give back in this, and it's very important for all of us to help other women succeed on getting on boards. And one of the ways I do that is I am program director at the Harvard School of Public Health in a course called Women on Boards, Getting On and Adding Value. And we meet, as Dawn said, at the school, at the program she was in, we meet fabulous women. And it gives us all the opportunity to give a helping hand to others who are interested as you are. So Jan, I think I'll end it with that.
Okay, thank you so much. Companies have long chosen board members based on their network of friends, which you've all just mentioned. But most of the time, and in most cases, those boards, their network is men. And I have a client who, like yourselves, is sitting on 4 corporate boards, and she's kind of developed this network of female executives, and she gives their name and recommendations to companies that are looking for female board members. So my question to you is, how have you built your network, and how has it worked for you and other women executives? And the other part of it is, what have you done to bring other women into the boardroom? And Ellen, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, teaching a course for women who are board ready and who are interested in sitting on boards is one of the ways I have had the largest reach to meet the most women to do this. But it is, a lot of it is very informal. We all talked earlier about organizations like the National Association of Corporate Directors, about women corporate directors, about the International Women's Forum. It is important to think about networking. Many of you have a day job, and it's important that you're focused on your day job, but because of that, you're high profile enough that you do meet other people, sit on other panels, speak to folks along the way, and that is enormously helpful to helping other people do this. So I think our job, once we've understood the good, the bad, and the ugly, the high risks and the low risks and sitting on boards, it's our job to do panels like this and to reach out to other people to be helpful for those along the way. So there's many tricks to the trade, but your network is a very important one. Your profile is important. And lastly, when you think about board work and you do your bios, it's not like applying for a job. Your bio for a board is different. And what boards are looking for is to understand what skills you bring to the boardroom, as opposed to what specific jobs you've had along the way.
Dawn, you want to try that one?
Yes, I think that's very well said. I could concur with everything that Ellen just articulated there. I think the way we build our networks is by doing what we do and doing it as well as we possibly can. And whether that's in our day job, whether that's in our volunteer capacities, whether that's in our neighborhood watch groups, whether that's wherever we are, you never, again, depending upon where you live, you can come across all kinds of different people who have all kinds of networks that you wouldn't even be thinking about based on the way in which you might be interacting with them. I do think the point about women helping women is vital. And I, as well, have spent most of my last 20 years, at least, of my career really focused on that. And I think oftentimes you have a particular sweet spot that you feel like you want to go in the direction of in your board service, but there may be multiple other opportunities that might come your way for which you're either not qualified, not particularly interested, or wouldn't find interesting. to yourself personally. And so I have a list. I have a folder actually where I keep all kinds of bios of all kinds of people that I've met along the way. I always am asking people to send me their board bio so that I can be in the position that Ellen just articulated. When someone calls and says, "Would you be interested?" If I'm not, or even sometimes if I am, I'll give them 3 other names of other people who also might be worthy of consideration. I think that is both a responsibility and an obligation that we all have for each other. The only way you can do that is you have to know people's skill sets. You have to know what their interests are. You have to understand kind of what their paths are. And it can take, 3 or 4 years of fairly concentrated effort to get on your first board. And so it's not, you have to be very sincerely focused on it. But at the same time, for myself, I found that I didn't want to serve on more than one public company board while I was working full time, because my day job was very demanding, as all of ours are and have been. And so I really wanted to use that time when knew I was going to be retiring and had about a year to then use that time to step on my first public company board. And that's what I did. And that worked out well, because now I have all kinds of bandwidth and I'm able to do a lot more, and I enjoy it. But it was really hard when I was working full time and had a really demanding job to also be the kind of board member that I wanted to be. I did it, but it was a super huge effort for a period of time.
Carrie, do you have anything to add to that?
Actually, I think Ellen and Dawn said it all. I think that for me, my life's work has been about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've made an effort and intentional, and I think intentionality. I'm pleased to report that one of the boards that I serve on will soon have another woman board member. Because it took me a while to find the right set of skills and the right background and so on. But I think we all owe it to the women that supported us as we move forward, to the ones that come behind us. So I completely agree with everything that's been said. We need to pay it forward.
Great. Thank you so much. That's great pieces of information. We're going to change directions here a little bit and ask each one of you separate questions. Ellen, you were just named to the board of Synchrony, which is a consumer financial services company. You're not coming out of that industry. So with your healthcare background, what attracted you to them and them to you?
It's a really interesting question. Thank you, Jan. Synchrony Financial is based in Stamford, Connecticut, and it used to be GE Capital. And when GE got out of the GE Capital business, it became Synchrony Financial. And they're a very large company in the financial services industry, but they have a sector within the company called Care Credit. And essentially what they do is provide credit. They have a market share of something like 85% of all dental practices in America. And similarly to veterinary practices, they own a pet insurance company. So they are really in the healthcare business on the insurance and financial side, but didn't have anybody that knew very much about healthcare on the board. What has been so wonderful for me is it's been like drinking from a fire hose, learning about the financial services industry. And I always thought healthcare was regulated until I got on the board of a financial services company. But having said that, just know the type of people you meet sitting on these boards, both on the executives and the board itself, are absolutely wonderful. And to Carrie's point about diversity and inclusion, the CEO of Synchrony Financial is among the most talented women I have ever met. And her workforce of thousands of people is as well in this particular area. And I have met other directors on this board that have remarkable backgrounds, everyone from a US Senator forward to very talented people throughout. So I can tell you they had a healthcare need and the match was good. And I certainly wanted to learn more about financial services. So it was a great match.
Sounds great.
It was.
Carrie, you're coming in here with your public policy credentials, and then you became the chair of the EEOC. Do you think that helped you get your first board seat and with the Calvert funds, or what do you think helped you?
Well, I have to tell you, I think there's a little hesitancy to get a former government official to serve on a board. You know, sometimes it's they rather go to the dentist than to with the government official. But I do think, you know, there's been a blend of sectors recently, and the trends that we're looking at with, of course, we look at healthcare, tremendous involvement on the part of Medicare, Medicaid, lots of government involvement. So it's become an important component of skill sets. Everything, Ellen mentioned financial services. I worked at Bank of America, highly regulated industry. So someone with that perspective and someone who's able to do some interpretation of some of the concerns that may be existing in the government, I think is a helpful addition. You know, there is a preference, and it still is, on the part of boards to either recruit an active or a retired CEO or a CFO. That has been the trend. But when you look at the factors that are happening now, when you look at, you know, climate change, when you look at the Me Too movement and pay inequities and racial unrest, there are all kinds of other issues that have come to the fore. ESG, for example, environmental social governance. So the boards have realized that it's very, very important to enhance and diversify the skill sets that they bring to the board. So I am proud to say that that's the perspective that I bring. And I've told them, I said, you know, I can read a financial statement, but I'm not an expert. And I certainly know about corporations. But the sweet spot for me, and so if this is a good match, this is what I can offer. And so I think with the trends that we're seeing, it's been a real need for people like us to join boards and provide that perspective.
Yeah, that's really important. Thank you. Dawn, you came out of the nonprofit world and you were leading like one of the largest nonprofit organizations in the world with the National Restaurant Association. Do you think that being on the nonprofit side and trying to get on the corporate side was a help or a hindrance?
I think in the end, it was very much a positive. I think initially it was sometimes hard for for-profit corporations to understand what it is, what the skills are of running a large organization like the subsidiary of AARP that I ran or the National Restaurant Association. But I do think there's a complexity that comes with for-profits and certainly with governments at a whole different level, as Carrie was just articulating. But there's a certain complexity that comes when you're running a very large organization with lots of stakeholders and lots of different opinions, and you're creating public policy positions, and the complexity that comes with that, and the ability to be agile and consensus building and move an organization that represents such a huge sector of the economy forward. When I was able to articulate that a little bit more clearly, I think it actually became a positive, because there are certain skill sets that are resident on most boards already. You know, has been said. You know, you'll have a financial experts, you'll have people who have a strong business acumen, who have experience in the sector that the company is focused on. But there is often a need for someone who has a better understanding or deeper understanding on corporate governance, which is the area that I had built some experience based on my day job, and as well just the whole regulatory environment, which again was part of what I worked in, lobbying and things of that nature. And so it really is, I think, it can be a real positive, but you have to be able to articulate it and tell the story about why you think the skills that you personally have are actually additive to what might be in the boardroom already.
Yeah, that's great. You know, as Carrie said, you know, organizations and companies continue to seek members that are in the current CEO space or CFOs or retired CEOs. And they're still very highly selective of choosing board members, and competition is obviously very fierce. But in the same breath, you know, they're looking for senior executives who have big picture experience and the operational and financial skills. But talk to us about what is more important. Is it the skills or is it the cultural fit? Ellen, can you help me with that?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I've been watching it change. I retired from my full-time position in 2011, and I've been watching this morph over the last 7, 8, 9 years. And when I first started, everybody wanted a CEO. And I used to say to them, but I'm not the one that buys the supplies in the hospital. I don't know the most about that. But they absolutely wanted the title. But I am seeing now there's a huge thirst for individuals who have very good marketing backgrounds, global people in human resources, global CHROs, a very significant thirst for that. Anything that has to do with digitization or cybersecurity, and people that have had to build programs like that and deal with it. So there's much more of an orientation from what I'm seeing for people who have been in the trenches and have actually done the work. What I'm seeing less of an interest in lately are for lawyers. Interestingly enough, I have a lot of women who are very accomplished attorneys and tell me they know a lot about governance. And the boards say, if I need that, I'll go out and buy it in the open market. As a board member, they're looking for your judgment. They're looking for you to be a big strategic thinker and your ability to do this for a large company. And I'm actually seeing less of an interest these days than I used to for people who are in academia. While many of them are still highly sought after, it goes back to wanting people who have done the job in the trenches.
Wow, that's great. I think we're running a little bit short on time, so we're going to ask this question, in which all of you mentioned when we were talking about this earlier. In the boardroom, and everybody seems to think this is where they want to go. They want a corporate board seat. But what they don't realize is that the minimum amount of time you put in is a minimum of 200 hours annually. And most directors go beyond that, correct? Then you have your committee assignments, and then you have your subcommittees, which Carrie and I were speaking about. This is an extraordinary amount of time that you are spending on this. Carrie, how do you explain this to people, and how do you help them understand it?
Well, again, Jan, I think you really have to know the expectations of a board these days and determine the capacity that you have to provide that oversight at the board level. Because you're so right. On average, according to NACD estimates, 240 hours. However, I can tell you that all of us on this panel, their board time has multiplied. We have weekly calls, we have reports, I have one-on-one meetings with other board members, with the CEO. It's really become all-consuming because of all the issues that are not just the COVID and the social unrest, but all of the other issues from a globalization, from the lack of the right skill sets that we have. There's tons of things, culture, as Ellen mentioned, that are coming to the fore. And so a CEO, different committees tap into the expertise of these individuals. So you really have to be prepared. You have to understand what your capacity is. And you have to make sure that you know why you want to serve on a board. There's also the reputational risk. And we've read all kinds of examples. We won't name companies, but there's all kinds of examples that have. I teach corporate governance for NACD, and I can tell you the list is endless in the types of issues that could affect someone serving on a board unless you really do your homework and you understand why you want to get on a board. Give you a quick example. I was invited to serve on a board, and then when I flew out and met, I found out that they had all kinds of environmental issues, huge challenges. It would have been my first board, but I decided to pass on it because I did not want to take on the reputational risk. So your capacity, your understanding of the company and why they're interested in you, and your own self research in terms of which industries are you most comfortable with, which one do you think you have a better cultural fit in terms of your background. So all of these things are, actually prep before you even get to the point of considering a board seat. I wrote a mission statement. I wrote a personal mission statement that said, why do I want to serve on a board? And I said, well, I think I can provide some oversight and guidance, not only to do well, but also to do good, because that was my focus, trying to serve all the stakeholders. So it's an important research to do before you consider a board seat.
That's just great advice. Thank you so much, Carrie. And before we go to the questions, I'm going to ask Dawn one last question. All of you have served on nonprofit boards and continue to serve on nonprofit boards. And then there's nonprofit boards, and then there's nonprofit boards. So what would be your advice to people trying to find their way to a pathway to a nonprofit board, to a board seat, corporate board seat? Can you help us, Dawn?
Yes, I do think it depends kind of where you are in the arc of your own career. If you're very early on in your career and you know this is a corporate board seat is something you want to do in a decade or more, further out in your lifetime, I think getting on a local or a statewide nonprofit that it has to have an interest to you, as has been said. You have to have you have to be able to answer the question, why am I going on this nonprofit board? Not because it has so-and-so on it or because it's connected to, such and such a gala or whatever. It's because you have, my opinion is, you are most effective when you actually deeply care about the issue that you're volunteering to pursue. And so in my case, Save the Children, I wanted to be on a board of the organization that, in the judgment of the people that I respected, was the strongest, most vibrant, most impactful organization for children in the world. And at the time, and I still think it's true today, that organization was Save the Children. And so I just went after that board seat like there was nobody's business. I was going to get on that board, and I called everybody I knew, and I talked to everybody I found. I found out somebody who was a friend of mine who lived next door to the COO. I called her. I was on a mission to get on that specific board. And honestly, when I look back now at my own career and the trajectory that my life has taken from a board sense, that was pivotal. It was absolutely pivotal. But I did it not from the sense of I want to use this as a stepping stone. I did it because I really deeply cared about the issues. And then when you care about the issues and you're engaged in the board work, you end up having opportunities to learn and grow. And I think for all of us, one of the most exciting things about serving on any kind of a board is the chance to learn and to grow and to challenge yourself and be intellectually stimulated and learn new things. And I think nonprofit boards are excellent ways to do that. So I would just encourage anyone who's interested in that path to think about the issues that they care the most deeply about, and then go after the organization that's best in that space, whether it's local, statewide, national, or global, depending upon where you are in your career. But I think it's a hugely positive way to begin your board service. I really do. I think it could be pivotal for many, as it was for me.
Thank you so much. We have a question from our participants, and whoever wants to take it. How would you recommend handling the possibility of a board position that is with a company that is considered controversial, or who is in the news today and it's a pretty controversial issue? What advice would you give to somebody looking at that kind of a board seat?
I would say follow your moral compass. That's really important. If someone, everyone watching this is in the healthcare industry. And if someone asked us to sit on the board of Philip Morris, I don't think there'd be too many takers. Let's be honest about it. And it's about, and Dawn just mentioned it, it's about what juices you up? What is your passion? And it better be consonant with that, or it won't be a fulfilling experience, and it won't lead to something greater.
Yeah, I would imagine all of you agree with that.
Definitely.
Okay. The next question from our participants is so we've been talking about eligible, board ready senior experience. So how much senior experience do you need to be considered board ready or board eligible? Who would like to take that one on?
Oop.
I can hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay, Dawn, you want to take that one?
I'll try to channel Carrie Dominguez here, best I can, because she would have the answer to this question. She would. And I think I will say, just as a opening comment, because I suspect she would have mentioned this too, for this particular question, NACD is an incredible resource, as is Women Corporate Directors and many other organizations. NACD has an enormous number of courses and programs and things you can take, and online now, everything, and to build up your skill set. The point that was made earlier, I think, is really, really important. When you're looking for a board seat, you're looking for something very different than a job. You're not being recruited there because you have expertise in X necessarily. Although, if you're a digital person, or as was said earlier, you have certain expertises, that's valuable. But the organization has people in place in paid jobs that are doing all those things. What you're there for is to add a layer of understanding around strategy. So really understanding the broad environment that the country is in today, the economic issues that our country is facing, understanding consumer sentiment and consumer confidence and all those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things to study up on. As you read the Wall Street Journal, you'll read the articles related to healthcare, but also read the articles related to, global unrest and other things that will put you in a position to be able to contribute at a different level. So I think, certainly, if you have had 10 years of experience in an organization, in an industry, you're probably, there's exceptions to this, I'm sure, but probably not quite ready for board service at the level that we're talking about here in terms of a public company. Having said that, I think there are certain places where they're looking for, younger folks with different experiences, and specifically looking for someone who has 10 years of experience. So it depends a lot on the kind of board you want to be on, the kind of contribution you want to make. I don't know that there's a pat kind of formulaic answer to that question, other than to say, I think each of us individually knows when we are ready to serve at this level for the kinds of organizations that we want to engage in. Carrie, are you back yet?
Carrie, are you back?
No.
No.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
No.
Okay, so we're gonna, I think we have time. I don't know if we have time left. Do we have time left, Emily? Okay, so I would like to just add one thing. We've learned a lot today, and this could go on for like a couple more hours, I'm sure. But I think that some of the advice that you want to take away from today is that, honestly, all of these women have said this. Your next board seat is going to come through your network, really. And for those of you that need a formula to understand that, is that only 20% of the board seats come through your search firm. 80% is through your network. And that's something you need to remember. So the other part is that we've left you with a PowerPoint that has 5 actionable takeaways, everything that we talked about this morning with these fine women. And I hope that you'll be able to get those at the end of this session. If we have any more questions, just let me know. We have one last question here. Does it make sense for mid-level executives to become board observers? Carrie, I would love to ask you, but I can't get you to talk.
The more information people can get, the better. In corporate boards, it's highly unusual that there would be a board observer, but that is not across the case, across the board in private for-profit companies or not-for-profits. So the more you can get exposure, whether it's through your PTA or a church group, as you grow to get even bigger and more sophisticated type boards. It's practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
The other thing I would add on that point is, if you ever have an opportunity to present to the board of your own company,
Yes,
that's a huge win and a chance for you to kind of get on the inside of your own organization. But be able, and we've seen this in the boards that I serve on, up and comers that will come in and do a presentation to the board on a particular subject. And it's an amazing way for us to see the talent in the organization, but also for the talented individual to see kind of what the board dynamics are and how that works, because it's difficult to explain it You have to almost feel it. And so if you ever have an opportunity, or you can create an opportunity through your own expertise to go and have your CEO give you the opportunity to present to the board of your own company, that I would encourage you to take advantage of that.
Wow, great advice. Thank you so much. All of you were fabulous today. And I thank you for being on this panel. And I thank Modern Healthcare.
thank you.
We thank you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. Thank you, Kari, Don, Ellen, and Jen for sharing real actionable steps. We are so grateful for your participation today. Thank you also to our audience members for engaging in the conversation. We'll now take a 55-minute break for networking opportunities. Go ahead and join our book club discussion, enjoy an afternoon yoga stretch, or participate in the networking carousel. Don't forget to visit our sponsor and exhibit pages too. So from the lobby, go ahead and click on that agenda tile and select your activity. But thank you so much to all of our panelists, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.